Hi, this is James Paterson, and here again for another in the short series on auditing in biopharma, and delighted to be joined again by Jaap van Oerle.
Hello, James. How are you?
Very well. And Jaap, you were going to remind us what we've been doing so far.
Yes, so we're doing these videos to share with you some of our experiences about how internal audit in the pharma industry can align to the pharmaceuticals value chain to, in fact, conform to what the definition of internal audit suggests, which is to add value and to help achieving the objectives of the organization. And what we're doing is taking you through the four crucial phases of the supply chain and stop at each one of them and see how internal audit can start from objectives into a risk assessment and a validation plan to achieve and help the organization achieve results.
Lovely.
So,
and
go ahead.
You did research and development last time in the last couple of videos, and I'm going to do manufacturing and supply now.
Thanks, James.
Thank you. So in terms of manufacturing, the obvious thing, and you can see this being discussed with COVID at the moment, even if you've researched a possible candidate therapy and you've then developed it and proved that it's there, you've still got to be able to make it to scale. Because if you can't make enough doses of this drug, you're going to be in trouble. And the way you do that is you plan capacity, you build facilities, or you contract for other people to build facilities. And what you're trying to do is have a footprint for your organization that will deliver all of the medicine that people need. And obviously, in terms of internal audit, you'd be dealing with very experienced engineers, capital project people, but the sorts of things that you can do in internal audit linked to that is at one level, a very housekeeping level. You could check how the project is spending its money and make sure that money's not being wasted in the interest of the shareholders. But you can also do deeper things like, well, you've planned for capacity here. Have you planned enough time to build that? Are you really sure that you have the resources to deliver this at the timeline that you wanted? So that's one opportunity for internal audit to add value. Anything else there on the capacity planning, Jaap?
Yes, maybe just a comment about why it matters so much, because when you don't have supply, that means you can't treat patients. And so the complexity here is that because of all the regulations and because of all the validation requirements of the plant itself, there's a very high degree of inertia. And so you can't just move capacity from one place to another and build or close. It's in fact quite an inflexible infrastructure, and that's why planning is so important.
Great. And then, as you said, you can build the capacity, but for all sites in a pharmaceuticals organization, you have to have them what's called validated. They are inspected, and regulatory authorities basically say, yes, this facility has the sterile approaches and various other requirements to make sure that it will produce pure pharmaceuticals product and pure therapies, and also all keep track of all the ingredients, etc., as well as the individual batches. So there's a massive amount that goes on backed up by this good manufacturing practice, GMP, to make sure that you get product that is safe and is not going to help anybody. And as we said before, that you can recall should, heaven forbid, there be a problem. But this then leads to roles for internal audit. The organization, the pharmaceuticals organization, relies on its GMP function, good manufacturing practice function, and we can be an extra pair of eyes and ears to check whether that function is doing everything to the highest standards. There will be regulatory inspections as well, but we can be an internal friend to critically assess whether it's doing everything to the standards that you might want.
Yes,
Any other comments, Jaap, about GMP and the role of internal audit?
no, I think you touched on the fact that in the regulatory area of quality, the quality assurance function is, in so many words, a second line of defense function and can be audited as such on its effectiveness in order to place reliance on their work. Because otherwise, internal audit would have to do parts of that quality assurance auditing themselves, which is actually quite a specific area. And perhaps also worth mentioning is that these inspections that you mentioned are an excellent, it's almost like a thermometer to see the temperature in the organization about, I mean, these are independent outside inspections by the authorities. Depending on the outcomes of their inspections, gives you very good insights in, first of all, risk in the plants, and secondly, whether the own quality assurance function is effective or not.
And you were mentioning before that one role sometimes that you can take in internal audit is really testing things like the quality culture, but also testing the disciplines around following things up as an extra check to the GMP function. Yes,
it's true that having quite large quality manuals with policies and training is necessary and a requirement in the regulatory field, but quality culture is something in-house, but is equally important. And nowadays, internal audit also needs to provide assurance on whether that quality culture is where it should be.
Very good. And then the final thing, while we talk about manufacturing generally, and then we'll turn on to supply, is obviously you will be making pharmaceuticals product, hopefully so there is a flow of product and at quality, but you don't want it to be done inefficiently from a cost perspective, or just an inefficiency in terms of volume. So maybe there's an impact on quality. And internal audit can play a really good role in, if there are issues about, well, why is this costing more than it should, digging into extra detail in partnership with the production people and the finance people to understand what's going on there. That's probably a fairly traditional role, but it's an important one. But there's another perspective that we can take when there are cost-saving programs in the manufacturing area. Yeah, make a couple of comments on that.
Well, I mean, the cost savings in manufacturing, we consider manufacturing a cost block in the P&L. And saving money in manufacturing means freeing up resources that can be injected in the research or in the marketing of the product portfolio. And so there's a possibility that those cost savings and those cost pressures get so big that to achieve those objectives in cost saving actually jeopardize either quality or the continuity of operations. And those are lines that, of course, cannot be crossed. And this is something that internal auditors need to watch out for.
And what's really interesting there, Jaap, is that comment about what I would say is the darker side of the objective, i.e. it's a good thing to save money, but there could be a darker side in terms of loss of resilience or loss of quality. Yep. This is a really critical role that a good internal audit function can play. So thank you for mentioning that. So just moving quickly on to the supply side, and I recognize we need to speed this up a bit just to keep the videos to the right length. You can make stuff, but you've still got to take therapies all the way from places where this is being made, perhaps with very, very specialist skills, all the way through perhaps across countries, and then something needs to be labelled in accordance with the laws and regulations of, let's say, France or Italy or Germany, and then provided. So there are really critical issues here about you can't afford to have weak links in the chain. You can't afford to have missing packaging requirements or missing packaging materials. And so what internal audit, one of the things that it can do is work with the people in the sourcing and the supply to challenge the design of the supply chain to make sure that people have thought in advance about what's going to be critical, to make sure it's resilient if things go wrong. And then also, in the same token, it's going to be really important for internal audit to look at the tracking of product through the supply chain and try to see whether there could be any weak points that, again, any constraints that need to be pinpointed and worked on. Yeah, any other ideas in terms of supply about work that we can play that would add value to organizations?
I think you covered all the important parts. The thing that I would like to stress is that the dependencies on other providers needs to be very, very carefully assessed, because the absence of parts that go into a product and actually are an integral part of the supply chain, if somewhere in that chain something breaks, you may actually fail on the commercial end of the operations, because you don't have anything to sell just because a small part that is missing and was not considered important. If I hear what happened in the COVID crisis about masks, which apparently 10 years ago were very, very basic things, and now we are screaming for supply everywhere, and we're totally dependent on China being able to make them or not, sounds like, wow, that's something that we could have prevented.
Very good. I agree with you. It shows you how our role is to think ahead, think to the side, these little specific practical details that sometimes, while people are busy delivering, can easily be overlooked, and we can play a role in making sure they don't happen. The final thing, obviously, is you have a requirement here in a pharmaceuticals companies to plan ahead and get the requirements that you need, and you will be forecasting based on the particular therapy that you've got, how many people will want it, how many people will want it in Germany, how many people will want it in Japan. Remember, if you've got German product, that needs to be packed and detailed in German. You can't simply take a German product and send it to Japan. And so the whole issue of forecasts in detail at the level of, in fact, not just country, but at the level of packs of product, which can sometimes depend on the way that doctors decide to prescribe, is very, very important. It's not just about one forecast, it's about lots of detailed forecasts. And the role of internal audit there to work with and sometimes challenge the people making these forecasts, so that we can really make sure every country has got the right number of packs in the right location at the right time. That's the level of challenge that can be traced, that we have to help the pharma organisation meet. Any other comments, Jaap, before we finish this section on manufacturing and supply?
Yeah, maybe just a comment about the, I mean, pharma is a bit like a Swiss clockwork where all the parts, all the moving parts depend on each other. And so in this forecasting, what is really, really important is that while capacity and manufacturing and supply are geared towards forecasts on the needs in the market, it is very, very important that the commercial forecasts and the manufacturing forecasts and the supply forecasts all fit together nicely. Otherwise, you get shortages or excessive stocks in different places, which is, of course, an inefficiency. Some margins there are healthy to ensure a safe supply, but if the disconnects between the forecasts at different stages in the supply chain become too big, that creates problems.
And you're really highlighting, as we just finished this session on manufacturing and supply, you know, the pharma company is important as the weakest link in the chain. And we as internal audit are really fabulously placed to look at the links between the chains. You know, you mentioned the sales forecast and the production forecast, and help make sure that these things are joined up. So that's lovely. Thank you very much again, Jaap. And we'll talk again on the marketing and sales shortly. Thank you.
I'll see you soon. Bye,
Bye.
James.